The Forbidden Love. In the heart of a lush, remote African village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, tradition reigned supreme. The villagers of Omutada had lived by their customs for generations, each one as immovable as the towering baobab trees that marked the boundaries of their land. It was in this village that Adana, an impulsive young girl, full of life, found herself caught in the grip of a fate she did not desire. Adana was known for her modesty and grace. Every morning she would rise before dawn, donning her vibrant African attire, a flowing wrapper in deep hues of blue and gold, a matching headscarf meticulously tied, covering her thick, braided hair. Her eyes, dark and full of life, held a secret longing that she dared not voice, not even to herself. Adana had been betrothed since childhood to Chief Okoro, a man 3 times her age. Okoro was a wealthy and respected man in Omutada, his influence stretching far beyond the village boundaries. It was an arrangement that brought honor to her family, yet filled Adana's heart with a silent dread. One day the village buzzed with news of a visitor, Father Burko. He was the son of the village who had left for the city many years ago, a boy at the time, only to return now as a man of God. The villagers, curious and reverent, flocked to the small chapel to catch a glimpse of him. Adana was among them, her heart pounding with a feeling she couldn't quite place. Father Burko stood tall, his presence commanding yet gentle. He was dressed in the simple robes of a priest, his head shaved ceremoniously clean. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and soothing, like the sound of a river flowing over smooth stones. "My people," he began, his voice carrying through the small chapel, "I have returned to help you find the path to God, to guide you through his teachings." Adana's eyes never left him. There was something about Father Burko that drew her in, a sense of familiarity mixed with an aura of mystery. She remembered him vaguely from her childhood, a boy who had once played in the fields with her and the other children. But now he was different, older, wiser, yet still carrying the essence of the boy she once knew. As the weeks passed, Adana found herself attending every sermon, every gathering at the chapel. She would sit quietly at the back, her eyes fixed on Father Burko, her heart fluttering with emotions she couldn't quite name. And soon, Father Burko began to notice her too, the quiet girl with the penetrating gaze, always dressed in her modest African attire. One afternoon, after a particularly moving sermon, Adana lingered behind as the other villagers left. She approached Father Burko, her heart racing. "Father," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "may I speak with you?" Father Burko turned to her, his eyes softening as he recognized her. "Of course, Adana. What troubles you?" Adana hesitated, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. How could she possibly voice what was in her heart? But something in Father Burko's calm demeanor gave her the courage to speak. I feel something inside me, Father," she began slowly, "something I cannot understand. I am betrothed to Chief Okoro, yet my heart longs for something else, something forbidden." Father Burko's expression darkened slightly, though he tried to hide it. He had taken a vow of chastity, a vow to serve God and his people without the distractions of earthly desires. Yet hearing Adana's words stirred something deep within him, a memory of the boy he once was, and the feelings he had once buried deep inside. "You must be careful, Adana," he said, his voice low and measured. "The heart is a powerful force, but it can lead us astray. You are bound by tradition, by duty. We must not allow ourselves to fall into temptation." But Adana could not be swayed. "I cannot help how I feel, Father," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I feel drawn to you as if our souls are connected. I know it is wrong, but I cannot fight it." Father Burko felt his resolve weakening, the words of his vow echoing in his mind. He had returned to Omutada to bring the light of God to his people, not to reignite old passions. But Adana's presence, her innocence, and her unspoken plea tugged at his heart. "Adana," he said softly, reaching out to touch her arm, "we must be strong. For your sake, for mine, and for the village. This cannot be." But even as he spoke the words, a part of him knew that the seed of something forbidden had been planted. And as the days turned into weeks, that seed began to grow, nourished by stolen glances and fleeting touches. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the village in a golden glow, Adana and Father Burko found themselves alone in the chapel. The air was thick with tension, the unspoken words between them hanging like a heavy cloud. "I cannot bear this any longer," Adana said, her voice breaking. "I cannot marry Chief Okoro. My heart belongs to you, Father Burko." Father Burko turned away, his hands clenched into fists. "You know this cannot be, Adana. I have taken vows. I am a servant of God. And I am a servant of tradition, Adana countered, stepping closer to him. But what about love? What about the truth that lies in our hearts? Can we truly ignore that? Father Burko closed his eyes, fighting the battle within himself. He knew what was right, what was expected of him. But he also knew that denying his feelings for Adana was like denying the very essence of his soul. I cannot break my vows, Adana, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. But perhaps in another life, in another time. No, Adana interrupted, her voice firm. In this life, in this time, we must choose our own paths. At that moment, the chapel doors creaked open, and Chief Okoro stood there, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. He had noticed the growing connection between Adana and Father Burko, and he would not allow his honor to be tarnished. What is the meaning of this? Chief Okoro's voice boomed through the chapel, causing both Adana and Father Burko to startle. Adana turned to face him, her heart pounding. I cannot marry you, Chief Okoro, she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. Chief Okoro's face twisted in anger. You dare defy me? You dare defy our traditions? Father Burko stepped forward, placing himself between Adana and the enraged chief. She is not a possession, Okoro. She has the right to choose her own path, as do I. The tension in the chapel was palpable, the air heavy with the weight of the words that had been spoken. Chief Okoro's eyes blazed with fury. You have made your choice, Chief Okoro finally said, his voice low and dangerous. But know this, there will be consequences. The village will not stand for this betrayal. With that, he turned and stormed out of the chapel, leaving Adana and Father Burko standing in the growing darkness, their hearts racing with the enormity of what they had just done. As the village began to murmur and whisper about the scandal that had erupted, Adana and Father Burko knew that their lives would never be the same. They had defied tradition, challenged the very foundation of their society. And now they would have to face the consequences together. But in that moment, as they stood side by side, the world around them seemed to fade away. All that mattered was the love they shared, forbidden though it may be, and the path they had chosen, together. In the heart of Omutada, where whispers wove like vines through the thatched roofs, Adana's world had begun to unravel. Father Burko, once draped in the vestments of his faith, now wore the traditional garb of his ancestors, a vibrant Kent cloth that seemed to carry the weight of his choices. His decision to step down as a priest had stirred the village into a cauldron of rumors and retribution, no longer shielded by the sanctity of his former vows. Without support and donations from the villagers, his promise to take Adana from the village seemed like wishful thinking. One sweltering evening, as the sun set with a fiery promise, Chief Okoro convened a secretive meeting in his hut, the walls lined with the spears and shields of his forefathers. Burko thinks he can simply cast aside his robe and walk away? Not while I draw breath, Okoro muttered, his voice a low growl. He must be shamed, broken. As if summoned by the chief's dark intent, a woman appeared in Omutada the very next day, her presence a sudden storm cloud over the village's dusty paths. Clutching the hands of a small child, while in her arms a baby looks longingly at his surrounding, she made her way straight to the communal well where Adana fetched water each morning. Excuse me, the woman's voice trembled as she approached Adana. Are you familiar with Burko? Before Adana could reply, she was hit with words that pierced her heart. He is the father of my children. Adana's bucket crashed to the ground, water seeping into the earth as her heart thudded wildly. There must be some mistake, she stammered, her eyes darting between the children, seeking any trace of Burko in their features. Meanwhile, Father Burko, unaware of the storm brewing, met with a senior father, a man whose wisdom was often sought but seldom heeded in these troubled times. Burko, the village speaks of nothing but your past deeds, the elder said, his voice heavy with sorrow. They whisper of women and children, secrets you've kept buried. These are lies crafted to break me, Burko replied, his fists clenched. I have made many mistakes, but this is not my doing. That night, Adana's sleep was haunted by visions of 3 shadowy figures chasing her through the endless rows of maize, their faces obscured by the dark. She awoke with a start, her skin slick with sweat, her heart pounding against her ribs like drumbeats in the night. Adana, we need to talk, Father Burko's voice cut through the early morning haze. He stood at the doorway, the lines on his face deeper than she remembered. I know about the woman, the children, Adana said, her voice barely a whisper. How could you? Adana, I swear on my life they are not mine. This is Chief Okoro's doing, a ploy to drive a wedge between us, Burko pleaded, his eyes searching hers for shards of trust. How can I believe you, Burko? After I have given you my heart, how? Adana's words were a mix of anger and anguish. "Just trust me. Let me prove my innocence," Berko urged, his hand reaching out to her. Reluctantly, Adana nodded, with doubt and fear in her heart, her dreams still echoing in her mind, a foreboding omen of the deception that might still lie ahead. As days turned into nights and nights back into days, the village of Omutada watched and waited. With each passing moment, the web of lies, deception, and mystery drew tighter around Adana and Berko, threatening to suffocate their love with the harsh vines of tradition and treachery. But beneath the whispers and shadows, truth, as it always does, began to stir, ready to emerge like the first rays of dawn over the horizon of Omutada. Amidst the turmoil and trepidation that enshrouded her waking hours, Adana found an unexpected sanctuary within her dreams. One night, the recurring vision of the three menacing figures pursuing her transformed dramatically. Instead of the oppressive fear that usually gripped her heart, a strange serenity washed over her as she ran from her pursuers. As the men gained ground, the earth beneath Adana's feet seemed to falter, and in an inexplicable burst of euphoria, she felt herself being lifted off the ground. Her body, light as a feather, soared upwards into the brilliant azure sky, leaving the baffled figures dwindling into specks below. The air around her was crisp and invigorating, as she glided over Omutada's lush expanse. Below her, the dense canopy of the forest was a tapestry of vibrant greens, punctuated by the meandering silver of rivers and streams that slithered through the landscape like living entities. The hills rolled gently at first, then rose into rugged valleys and imposing mountains, each breath she took filled with the pure, cool air of freedom. Adana flew higher, the warmth of the sun enveloping her as she ascended toward a majestic mountain that pierced the heavens. Landing softly on its summit, she felt a profound sense of peace, as if she had transcended the earthly binds of her troubled life. From this vantage point, the world seemed smaller, the problems less insurmountable. She stood there on the peak, the wind whispering secrets only meant for her, tales of strength and new beginnings. The dream shifted her perspective, infusing her with a newfound resolve to face the challenges below, not with despair but with the courage and hope of someone who had seen the world from above and knew there was beauty beyond the strife. As dawn's first light seeped through the curtains of her modest room, Adana awoke, her heart lighter than it had been in days. The dream, vivid and empowering, was a beacon guiding her through the storm, a reminder that sometimes, one must rise above to see the path ahead clearly. Adana's newfound peace was fragile, a delicate shell that threatened to shatter with each gust of village gossip. Compelled by her vivid dream and the unresolved tensions swirling around her, she sought out the senior father, hoping his wisdom would guide her through the murk of rumors and whispered accusations. The aged priest greeted her in the quiet solitude of his study, a room lined with ancient texts and the faint scent of incense. He motioned for her to sit, his eyes reflecting a blend of concern and sorrow. "Father, I need to know the truth," Adana began, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. "Is what they say about Berko true? Did he really lead such a scandalous life before his return?" The senior father sighed, his hands clasped tightly as if holding the weight of his next words. "My child, it pains me to confirm that the rumors you've heard aren't baseless fantasies. Berko was indeed involved with several young women during his time away from Omutada. His actions were regrettable, and they have cast long shadows over his intentions now." Adana felt a chill as her hopes dissolved, replaced by a cold, hard disappointment. Why would he lie, pretending to be something he's not? Perhaps Berko returned to Omutada seeking redemption, hoping to escape the errors of his past, the priest explained, his voice tinged with a sad wisdom. "Sometimes, we believe that changing our skies will change our souls. He wanted to start anew, and perhaps he thought concealing his past was the only way to truly break from it." The walls were inching closer, trapping her in a web of deceit. "And the children, the woman who claims they are his, is that true as well?" Adana's eyelids fluttered shut, a fragile barrier against the harsh truth she feared would spill forth, as she braced herself against the inevitable revelations that might shatter her world. Adana's heart raced as she closed her eyes, bracing herself for the weight of the truth she feared. A tremor coursed through her as she stood on the edge of the unknown, dreading the words that might spill from the senior father's lips. Father paused, his gaze heavy, his silence stretching painfully between them. Each second seemed to drag, the air thick with unspoken tension. He measured his words with deliberate care, knowing that what he was about to say could shatter the fragile heart that was before him. "That I cannot confirm, Adana. Matters of paternity are complex, and without truth from Berko himself, we are left with only suspicions," the senior father cautioned. Adana stood, her resolve hardened like the peaks in her dream. Thank you, Father. I must confront him with this. I need to hear the truth from Berko himself, no matter how harsh it may be. As she left the priest's study, her mind raced. The dream that had offered her such peace now seemed a cruel joke, a fleeting escape from a reality marred by betrayal. Determined to uncover the full extent of Berko's duplicity, Adana prepared for a confrontation that would either salvage the remnants of their bond or sever it completely. The shadow of the mountain peak in her dream loomed large. It was time to descend from the heights and face the truths that lay hidden in the valleys of human frailty. Adana's decision to follow her heart had led her down a path fraught with isolation, away from the familial bonds she once held dear. Adana's family was barely speaking to her. Before she confronted Berko, she impulsively decided to visit her aunt, just on the outskirts of the village, who was disowned and banished for breaking tradition. Now almost disowned, she found refuge in the humble abode of her Aunt Nia, who lived just beyond the fringes of Umutata, in an area where the untamed wilderness began to reclaim the land. Aunt Nia's home was modest, made of clay and thatch, standing alone like a sentinel at the village's edge. Adana found her aunt outside, tending to a small garden that thrived against all odds, filled with herbs and plants of medicinal value, whispered to hold ancient secrets. "Auntie, thank you for allowing me to visit," Adana said, approaching her cautiously. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and rain, a storm brewing on the horizon. Nia turned, her face marked by the years and the burdens of her own past. "Child, the outcast knows the pain of another outcast. Sit with me." They sat on small stools by the garden, and Nia plucked a leaf, crushing it between her fingers, releasing a sharp, sweet scent. "Adana, they say I am a witch, that I broke tradition. But what they don't understand is that I am Hebrew, connected to the ancient ways, to the spirits of those who walked before us." Adana listened, her heart open and raw. "I feel lost. Auntie, if the spirits still speak, what do they say of me?" Nia closed her eyes, a soft chant escaping her lips. After a moment, she opened her eyes and fixed them on Adana. "The spirits see all, child. They say you are caught between worlds, between the lies of man and the truths of the earth. They do not call you a witch, but a seeker of truths. How can I find my path when everything I trusted has betrayed me?" Adana's voice cracked the weight of her trials, bending her spirit. "Hebrew is your path," Aunt Nia replied softly. "You are crossing over. You must listen not to the voices of those who cast stones, but to the whispers of the wind, the songs of the river, and the rustle of the leaves, your heritage, your blood. It calls you to rise, not to fall." Nia advised, her tone both gentle and firm. "I'm scared, Auntie. What if I am not strong enough?" Adana confessed, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. Nia reached out, her hands rough but warm as they clasped Adana's. "You come from a line of women who bent but never broke. Do you feel that?" She placed Adana's hand over her heart. "That beating is not just your heart. It's the heartbeat of all who came before you. You are never alone." The few precious days Adana spent with Aunt Nia unlocked something deep within her, a door she knew she must walk through. She felt full, enlightened in a way that was both exhilarating and unsettling. A strange curiosity clung to her spirit, pulling her toward the unknown past, a history that whispered just beyond her reach. Her mind raced with a blend of anxiety and anticipation. Yet, there was a spark of hope, a quiet assurance that everything would be all right because she wasn't walking this path alone. She felt guided by something greater, something unseen but undeniably present. "Thank you, Auntie. I will listen, I will learn, and above all, I will not run from who I am." With her aunt's blessings and the ancestral spirits whispering courage into her soul, Adana was ready to confront Berko, armed with a newfound strength drawn from her roots that reached deeper than the soils of Amutata. As the last drops of the rainstorm fell, mingling with her tears, Adana felt a deep stirring within her soul. A call to embrace the storm as a force meant to cleanse her doubts and water her resolve. Each drop seemed to wash away the uncertainties, leaving only clarity in its wake. Adana smiled through the rain, her heart lighter as if the storm itself had whispered its approval. The rain's steady rhythm mirrored the beat of her newfound strength. She whispered to herself, "Go, and when you find your truth, let it shine bright, even if it stands alone in the darkness." The words felt like a promise to herself, a vow to carry forward with unwavering determination, no matter what lay ahead. By the time Adana reached the village, the sun began to peek from behind the last visible cloud, casting a warm glow over the soaked earth, as if to pretend the sudden storm had been nothing more than a figment of her imagination. The wet ground glistened in the soft light, and the air, still heavy with the scent of rain, felt strangely calm. Adana paused for a moment, catching her breath, her heart still pounding from the rush of the storm. The chaos of the rain seemed so distant now, as though the sky itself was trying to wash away the memory of it. Yet, deep down she knew that the storm had been real, just as real as the uncertainty swirling inside her and the revelation that she was on the right path, the path of her Hebrew ancestors. Under the sprawling canopy of an ancient baobab, where the roots dug deep into the earth and the leaves whispered secrets of old, Adana found Berko. He was sitting alone, staring into the distance, his face etched with the lines of worry and weariness. As she approached, Berko looked up, his eyes lighting up with a mixture of surprise and relief. Adana, he breathed out as if her name were a balm to his troubled spirit. Berko, Adana replied, her voice carrying the weight of her recent revelations. She sat beside him, their shoulders touching lightly, a small comfort in the vast uncertainty that lay between them. I've been with Aunt Nia on the outskirts. She told me something about us, about who we really are. Berko's interest piqued, he turned to face her fully. What did she say? She said we are Hebrews, Berko. That our actions, our lives, are guided by the spirits of our ancestors. Adana's voice was steady, her eyes searching his for any flicker of recognition or denial. Berko looked off in the distance, his eyes clouded with a distant gaze. He turned his head, slowly gazing into Adana's eyes. The silence between them grew heavy. Berko gazed in the distance as if searching for a memory buried too far inside. His brow furrowed slightly, the weight of forgotten thoughts pressing against his consciousness. Berko's expression softened, a sigh escaping him as if he were releasing a long-held breath. Adana sensed that somewhere deep within him he was grasping for something. Something elusive, perhaps long lost, yet too important to let go. My mother? She told me the same when I was just a boy. That we descended from a line of Hebrew, that our blood carried the legacy of prophets and kings. His voice faltered, the memory clearly a tender one. But my father, Berko continued, his gaze dropping to his hands, he was furious when he overheard us. He said it was nonsense, that such talk was dangerous, and he forbade us ever to speak of it again. I buried it deep, Adana, thinking it was just old wives' tales. Adana listened, her heart aching for the young boy Berko must have been, caught between the truth of his mother and the denial of his father. It's not just tales, Berko. It's our heritage, our truth. Aunt Nia believes, and now I do too, that these spirits, our ancestors, they guide us even now. They are calling us to embrace who we are, to not be afraid of our past but to draw strength from it. Berko looked up at her, his eyes reflecting a turmoil of emotions. All this time I've been running from who I am, trying to be what the village wanted, what I thought God wanted. But maybe it's time to face it, to accept who I am, who we are. Adana reached out, taking his hand in hers, a gesture of unity and understanding. We can discover this together, Berko. We don't have to have all the answers now, but we can search for them side by side. Berko nodded, squeezing her hand in return, a silent vow passing between them. Together, he agreed, a spark of hope igniting in his eyes. As they sat beneath the baobab, the setting sun cast long shadows across the ground, weaving patterns of light and dark that seemed to dance to the ancient rhythms of their heritage. In that moment, Adana and Berko were no longer just outcasts of Omutada. They were heirs to a legacy that stretched back through generations, called upon by the spirits of their ancestors to walk a path only they could tread. The air grew cooler as the evening drew in, carrying with it the sense of the earth after a day of rain then warmed by the sun. Adana and Berko remained seated under the ancient baobab, a silent witness to their unfolding truths and reconciliations. Adana took a deep breath knowing that there was an unresolved issue between them, a weight that pressed on her heart. The woman's accusation lingered like a shadow, and no matter how much she wanted to trust Berko, the doubts gnawed at her soul. She needed answers, she needed the truth. She found the strength to confront him. Berko, she began, her voice trembling with both fear and resolve, what about the woman who claims you are the father of her children? Her breath caught in her throat, her heart aching for clarity. I want to believe you, I do, but it's not easy with all these shadows around us. Her eyes locked onto his, pleading for the honesty she so desperately sought. Berko met her gaze, his expression somber yet resolute. Adana's voice softened as she added, in my heart, I believe it's not true, but why did Senior Father lie to me? Her words hung in the air, thick with the weight of betrayal, hope, and the need for the truth to finally break through the silence. Berko stood still, his face a mixture of pain and weariness, but his eyes never left hers. I understand your doubts, Adana, and I won't fault you for them. But you must understand, the senior father, as wise as he is not immune to believing the rumors that swirl through Umutata. He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. The truth is, the woman was manipulated by Chief Okoro. He has a reputation, though well hidden, of casting aside women when they are most vulnerable. I've heard tales during my time away, stories of children scattered like seeds, children he refuses to acknowledge. Adana listened intently, her heart torn between the man she loved and the swirling maelstrom of village politics and deception. Then why would she point to you? Why drag you into this? Adana's voice was a whisper, laden with the fear of what his answer might be. Because I am an easy target, Adana. I left the church, I defied the traditions. Who better to cast as a villain than one who already stands accused of breaking faith? Burko's tone held a bitterness that he usually kept at bay. But why would the chief do this? What does he gain? The confusion was clear in her voice. Power, control. By discrediting me, he ensures that no one else dares to defy him as I did. And perhaps, Burko's voice dropped to a near whisper. He seeks to drive us apart, to break whatever influence I might have over the people or over you. The pieces began to fall into place for Adana, each revelation like a puzzle piece fitting into the gaping holes of her understanding. So what do we do? How do we prove your innocence? Burko squeezed her hand, a small smile breaking through his worried facade. We find proof. We show the villagers the truth about Okoro's deception. It won't be easy, Adana. It might even be dangerous. But if we stand together, we can restore the truth. Adana nodded, her resolve hardening. Then we will stand together, Burko. Not just for us, but for all those silenced by fear and manipulation. We will bring the truth to light. As night enveloped the village, the two figures under the baobab tree were a testament to the power of unity in the face of adversity, determined to reclaim the narrative that had been wrested from their hands. Adana, Burko began, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision he had made. I must leave Umutata for a while. It's the only way I can gather the evidence we need to clear my name and expose the chief's manipulations. Adana's heart sank at the thought of being apart from Burko, yet she understood the necessity of his journey. How long will you be gone? She asked, trying to mask her concern. As long as it takes to find undeniable proof. I promise I will return as soon as I can, Burko assured her, his eyes earnest and resolute. With a brave nod, Adana agreed. Then go, and know that my thoughts and prayers will be with you. We will stand together again soon. They embraced under the starlit sky, a promise of reunion sealed between them. As Burko disappeared into the darkness, Adana felt a surge of determination bolstered by their shared purpose. That night, as Adana slept, her recurring nightmare began as it always did, with the three shadowy figures chasing her. Though she only saw three, she always felt in her spirit that they were more. This time, as she floated upwards, escaping their grasp, something miraculous unfolded. The sky opened up, revealing a celestial vista filled with angels singing a melodious hymn that resonated with the deepest parts of her soul. Beside her, partially hidden behind a cloud, an angel smiled warmly at her, its presence comforting and profound. Below, a multitude of Hebrews, her people, stood together, united in their belief in the truth. Their voices joined the angels in a powerful rendition of a heavenly song, a sound so pure and overwhelming that it filled Adana with an indescribable peace. As the dream concluded, Adana awoke, her heart brimming with an unshakable joy and peace. The vision had reinforced her resolve. Adana's night vision had reinforced her resolve, imbuing her with a serene confidence that the path they were on was righteous and blessed. Inspired by the celestial message in her dream, Adana felt a fire ignite within her, a certainty that her people needed to know the truth. The dream had spoken to her, the vision of angels and her ancestors singing filled her with a purpose she couldn't ignore. It was more than a revelation, it was a calling. But as much as the truth weighed on her, she knew the time wasn't right. The community wasn't ready for such a revelation. It would take patience, wisdom, and careful preparation. The strength she had drawn from the dream gave her hope. She would rally her people when the moment came, but for now she would wait. Like a seed planted deep in the earth, the truth would grow. When the time was right, it would blossom into something undeniable, something that could no longer be silenced. She resolved to prepare quietly, to learn, and to listen for the signs. The truth would come, and when it did, it would light the way for her people, just as the angels had lit her path in the dream. As the weeks stretched into months, Adana's heart ached for Burko's return. The vibrant colors of Umutata seemed to dull under the weight of Adana's sorrow. Each sunrise brought hope that Burko would return, and each sunset took a piece of that hope away, leaving her heart a little heavier. The villagers whispered in hushed tones, casting glances her way, their eyes filled with pity and not a little fear of Chief Okoro's tightening grip on the village. Chief Okoro, ever watchful and calculating, saw in Adana's vulnerability an opportunity to reclaim the influence he had lost. His visits became more frequent, each one cloaked in the pretense of concern, but the underlying motive was clear: to bind Adana to him and, through her, restore his tarnished authority. One afternoon, as Adana tended to the small garden that had become her refuge, Chief Okoro approached her, his shadow falling over the bright flowers she so lovingly cared for. "Adana," he began, his voice soft yet insistent, "you must face the truth. Berko is gone and he is not returning. You need protection and stability. I can provide that. You have no one else." Adana stood up slowly, wiping her hands on her skirt, her back to the chief as she composed her face into a mask of detached politeness. "Chief, I need time. I cannot think of marriage while my heart still holds hope for Berko's return." "But how long will you wait for a ghost, Adana?" Chief Okoro pressed, stepping closer. "It has been 6 months. The village needs stability and you need a husband." As more months rolled by and no word came from Berko, Adana's resolve began to crack under the weight of her loneliness and the unrelenting pressure from Chief Okoro. With each passing day, the likelihood of Berko's return diminished, and the memory of his promise seemed like a distant dream. A year had passed. Finally, worn down by grief, the insistence of her family, and the relentless advances of Chief Okoro, Adana agreed to marry him. It was a decision born of despair, a resignation to the circumstances rather than a choice made freely. The wedding was a somber affair, markedly different from the vibrant celebrations typical of Omutada. Adana moved through the ceremonies like a specter, her heart and thoughts elsewhere. Chief Okoro, looking aged beyond his years, stepped behind Adana, as he placed the wedding necklace around her neck, a final symbol of their union to seal her to him forever. Adana felt as if a noose were tightening around her future, her dreams of a life with Berko fading into the shadows. Just as all seemed lost, a figure, dusty and worn from travel, limped towards the gathering. The crowd parted, whispers turning into exclamations of disbelief and joy. Berko returned to Omutada just as the dry season began, when the dust stirred into the air with every step and the sun watched over the land with a relentless gaze. His journey had been arduous, but within his grasp, he carried the promise of vindication and the hope of a new beginning. As Berko entered the village, the sound of music and laughter greeted him, signaling a festivity in full swing. His heart beat faster as he scanned the crowd. In the distance he caught sight of Adana. She stood with Chief Okoro, who was delicately fastening a necklace around her neck. A sense of unease prickled through Berko as he watched, his steps quickening toward them. "Adana, I have it. The proof we need," Berko shouted, eagerly rushing through the crowd. He held up an envelope, the contents of which gleamed with the hope of justice. At the sound of Berko's voice, Adana swiftly turned, her eyes widening with a mix of relief and anticipation. She broke into a run, her movement, sudden and urgent, snapped the necklace and it slipped from Chief Okoro's hands and fell to the ground. Without a second thought, Adana flew into Berko's arms. They embraced tightly, a reunion of hearts and souls long separated by distance, trials and truth. The world around them faded, the noise of the festivity reduced to a hum as they clung to each other. For the first time that day, Adana's heart, which had been numb through the ceremony's empty rituals, came alive. Her pulse raced with joy, her breath caught with the relief of his return. In Berko's arms she felt whole again, like a piece of herself had been restored. "Berko," she cried, her voice breaking the heavy silence that had fallen over the crowd. "I was so lost without you," Adana confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "When you didn't return, I feared the worst. And the chief, he pressured me. I had no one, I thought you were gone forever. I made a promise to you, Adana. I will always find a way back to you, nothing can break us," Berko said. Adana looked at him with curious longing, her voice soft but filled with the questions that had lingered in her heart for so long. "But where were you? Why did you stay away so long?" Berko's eyes flickered with a mixture of regret and resolve as he spanned the crowd, noticing the growing restlessness among the people. He hesitated, the weight of his absence heavy on his shoulders. He glanced at the crowd, sensing their impatience, but turned back to Adana, his gaze softening. "But I should have come back sooner." The murmurs from the crowd grew louder, but in that moment, Berko's focus remained on Adana, the connection between them unspoken yet undeniable. "I would have come back sooner if only I could." Adana's brow furrowed as she stepped closer, her voice trembling with both curiosity and concern. What do you mean, Berko? What are you not telling me? I will explain, Berko said, his voice steady, though his gaze shifted to Chief Okoro, who stood at the edge of the restless crowd. His eyes lingered on the chief for a moment. Berko's gaze didn't waver as he continued. Adana, Berko began, his voice filled with quiet determination as he stepped closer. You know I've pledged to find the truth about the children they claim to be mine. Adana's eyes searched his, her emotions a mixture of hope and uncertainty. I know, Berko, but it's been so long and the rumors, they won't stop. I have proof. Berko declared, holding up the envelope for all to see. The crowd fell silent, their eyes fixated on the small but powerful object in his hand, curiosity thick in the air. Adana's heart raced as she stared at the envelope. Berko, what's in there? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Not long after I left here I was taken. Kidnapped. I believe the chief was behind it. The dust of Omitada had barely settled when Berko, his voice tinged with urgency and fatigue, began to unravel the harrowing tale of his long disappearance. As the villagers gathered around, drawn by the drama unfolding before them, Berko took Adana's hands in his, ensuring she felt the sincerity in his words. They held me in a place I did not know, far from here. I think the chief wanted to make sure I wouldn't return, to ensure that he could manipulate his way back to you and keep his power over Omitada without me to challenge him. Adana's heart pounded as fear and relief collided within her. Kidnapped? Tears welled in Adana's eyes as she listened to Berko's tale of survival and escape. The villagers murmured among themselves, the pieces of a sinister puzzle falling into place, revealing the depth of the chief's treachery. Berko stood before them, his presence commanding yet humble. My people, I have returned not just to clear my name but to reveal a truth that has long been buried beneath lies and deceit. The children who were claimed to be mine are indeed not, Berko announced, his voice steady and clear. These DNA results, he waved the envelope for all to see, prove without a doubt that they are the children of Chief Okoro. The villagers eyed Berko with suspicion. Berko explained, years ago when I was away I worked in a lab that performed DNA testing. I learned that DNA could tell a story of truth about lineage and legacy in matters of paternity. Before I left Omitada months ago, I had secretly secured DNA samples from Chief Okoro and all involved. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the weight of Berko's words settled over them. All eyes turned to Chief Okoro. Murmurs turned into shouts of anger. Chief Okoro, who stood among them, his usual commanding air now faltering, could no longer hide behind his lies. The chief, who had been silent until now, realized the gravity of his situation as the eyes of the villagers turned towards him, their expressions hardened by the truth of his actions. Faced with undeniable evidence, the chief confessed. His voice broke as he admitted to his manipulation and deceit actions driven by fear and a desire to maintain power at all cost. The village council acted swiftly. Chief Okoro was stripped of his title and was to be tried for his crimes. The contents of the letter was scrutinized and found to be as Berko said. The villagers found solace in Berko's revelations, and the chief's reign of deceit was over. In the days that followed, Adana's father could not ignore the transformation in his daughter. Her happiness was palpable, and her maturity shone through every action. She had blossomed into a woman of strength, guided not just by tradition but by love. Berko's presence in her life had nurtured this growth, and soon, even the most skeptical of her relatives admitted to her transformation and came to accept Berko. Adana's father watched as Berko treated his daughter with respect and kindness. The love between them was pure, unburdened by the weight of societal expectations. One evening, under the orange glow of the setting sun, Berko approached Adana's father. Dressed in the traditional garb of his ancestors, the vibrant Kent cloth symbolizing both his heritage and his resolve, he humbly asked for Adana's hand in marriage. Sir, Berko began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, I have come to ask for your blessing. I love your daughter deeply and I wish to marry her, to honor her and build a future together. My daughter has never been happier. I could not have asked for a better man to care for her. Yes, Berko, you have my blessing, my son, he replied. Later, as Berko looked into Adana's eyes, he whispered, I've loved you since the moment I returned to this village, Berko began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. He took her hand, gently before kneeling on one knee beneath the towering tree that had witnessed so much of their journey. Marry me, Adana, Berko continued, his hand tightening around hers as he pulled out a simple yet beautiful ring. Will you walk with me through life hand in hand as my wife? Adana's eyes brimmed with tears, her heart overflowing with the love she felt for Berko. Her tears fell freely now, mingling with the cool night air as she nodded, a joyful smile breaking through her trembling lips. "Yes, Berko," she said, filled with love and certainty. "Yes, I will marry you." Her head spinning under the canopy of stars that twinkled above them. The world felt right, whole, as if the universe itself had aligned to bring them together in this moment. On their wedding day the sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow over the village. Adana's father smiled as he walked her toward Berko, who stood tall in his Kent cloth, heart swelling with pride. Adana, radiant in her blue and gold gown, wore a beautiful geli, adorned with gold jewelry, passed down through generations. A vision of grace and loyalty. Berko looked at her with love and admiration. He had never seen anyone more beautiful. Their wedding was set under the same baobab tree, its branches witnessing yet another pivotal moment in their lives. The entire village came together to celebrate their unity. As they exchanged vows, their eyes never left each other. "I vow to stand by you no matter the storm," Adana said, her voice unwavering. "To love you with every part of my being, and to walk with you into whatever future awaits us." "And I vow," Berko replied, his voice rich with emotion, "to cherish you, protect you, and to build a life with you filled with love, truth, and faith." Aunt Nia said a blessing over the happy couple. "May you be like the roots of this baobab tree," her voice thick with emotion and pride. "Grounded, strong, and unmovable. May your love grow deep and wide, nourishing all that it touches as the ancestors guide you into all truth." When the ceremony ended, Adana abandoned her elaborate headgear, slipping back into her usual modest attire. As the night descended and the villagers dispersed, Berko and Adana returned to the old tree, their tree, where they sat beneath its sprawling branches, the stars once again watching over them. "When I was kidnapped," Berko began, "I met an old man who spoke of people without a leader. They were scattered because they walked away from their God." The old man told a tale of a burning bush and a man standing on a mountain writing with the finger of God. But the villagers only laughed and mocked him, saying that he was mad. Adana looked up at the stars. "He's not mad. He has seen the ancestors like I have in my night vision. He is one of us. We are one of them. They are calling us back. This is an awakening." Adana felt the stirring in her soul. It was time to wake up her people. She understood the richness of her heritage and the wisdom in her roots. A resounding echo burned in her heart. "Tell my people." Berko and Adana understood their connection to the divine, and the path laid before them. They embraced their calling, walking in the wisdom of the ancestors and the essence of truth. Together they will lead their people toward truth. "The awakening has begun," Adana whispered. Berko nodded in silent consent under the baobab tree. In the days ahead, Berko and Adana with Aunt Nia spread the message of hope to a lost people, about a God who never forgot them. "He is coming back," they said. "He remembers his promise. He is coming back for us. These dry bones will live again." The new teaching swept over Omatata like a storm, leaving the village divided and buzzing with whispers. Some were captivated by the message of their ancient heritage, while others clung to tradition like a lifeline. Berko stood before the villagers, his voice strong, unwavering. "Our ancestors' bloodline runs deep," he declared, eyes blazing with conviction. "It is pure and holy." Berko recounted the ancestors' story. The beauty of Abraham's wife, Sarah, was unmatched. Her soft, dark skin caught the eye of the evil one, who sought to defile her and taint the bloodline. Aunt Nia, her voice carrying the weight of wisdom, interjected. "He tried again with Rebecca, but the Ancient One is faithful. He delivered them from evil." The villagers stirred, some nodding, others frowning. But not everyone was pleased. Senior Father, his voice dripping with authority, had called a meeting with Berko. The air in the small room crackled with unspoken tension as the elder faced the young man. "What is this you're teaching, son?" Senior Father's voice was firm, laced with a mixture of curiosity and anger. "How can this be?" Berko hesitated, the weight of the ancestors pressing on his shoulders. He took a deep breath, drawing strength from their legacy. "It is our heritage, Senior Father. We had forgotten who we truly are. We descend from a line of kings." Senior Father's face darkened. "How would you know that, Berko?" His voice rose, anger bubbling to the surface. "How can you claim this?" "The truth," Berko replied softly, "will always seep through like water." Senior Father was not swayed. Berko could see it. The elder's mind was closed, as was his heart. The room felt small, suffocating. Rising to leave, Berko paused as Senior Father's voice boomed behind him. "You are forbidden to speak of this. You are tearing this village apart, filling these people with lies and false hope. The elder's words stirred up old memories. Berko spun around, eyes fierce. You forbid me to speak the truth? His voice was low, but it vibrated with intensity. How can I be silent when the fire of his word burns within me? For a moment they locked eyes, Senior Father's gaze full of command, Berko's filled with defiance. Then, without another word, Berko walked out. Senior Father's final shout echoed behind him, I will stop you, Berko. The younger people were drawn to Berko and Adana's message, but the elders, steeped in tradition, resisted. Later, Berko and Adana sat beneath the sprawling tree that had become their sanctuary. The air was thick with emotion as they sought comfort in its roots and shelter in its branches and wisdom from its leaves. Berko, Adana began, her voice heavy with worry. Our people don't believe. Berko sighed, this is new to them, Adana. They cling to tradition because it is safe. The truth terrifies them. My heart aches for them, Adana whispered. Berko drew Adana close. We must continue, Berko replied, his voice resolute. We were sent to them. As they sat in silence, the night seemed to press in on them, wrapping them in its shadows. To Aunt Nia's delight, Berko and Adana had built their house, close to her hut, nestled in a quiet part of the village near the outskirts. Aunt Nia was especially thrilled, knowing that Adana would be close to her. Aunt Nia's garden flourished. The rains, a blessing, came more frequently on their side of the village. The herbs she planted thrived, basil, sage, lavender, and rare plants whose names only Aunt Nia knew, whispered to her by the voices of the ancestors. Meanwhile, Senior Father's grip on the village was slipping. Rumors of his corruption spread like wildfire, whispers of stolen money, of deceit. The elders who had once stood by his side began to distance themselves. At the same time, Berko's message began to resonate with the villagers. Slowly hearts opened and the gatherings under the tree grew. Berko spoke with authority, as he continued to recount the stories of their ancestors. Abraham, the father of many nations, was willing to sacrifice his only son Isaac. And because of his obedience, God promised to make his descendants a great nation. The people listened, their eyes wide, as Berko continued. We are those descendants. The promise of a kingdom is ours. The villagers talked among themselves as they walked home. Aunt Nia, with her special gift, guided by the ancestors, could mix herbs and spices in ways that healed ailments the villagers had long suffered from. Her remedies spread through the village like the aroma of the herbs she dried in the sun. The villagers came, some with coins, others with food or materials to trade. Adana worked beside her aunt, learning the art of blending the earth's gifts into healing potions, tonics, and salves. Berko often traveled beyond Umatata, taking with him bundles of dried herbs, oils, and ointments. He returned with coins in his pouch, tools for the garden, cloth for clothing, and food to last them through the seasons. One evening they went to deliver ointment to the sick. Adana met an old man in a room. His eyes, though ancient and weathered, gleamed with a strange brightness. You are one of them, he said, his voice certain. And you, Adana said softly, are one of us. Berko told me about you. No, he shook his head. It was my twin brother. He passed on to the ancestors, but before he did, he poured his wisdom into Berko. Adana's heart tightened. She understood now why Berko had to be away for so long. The old man told Adana that the angels who were set to watch over the earth came down and mate with the daughters of men and produced mighty men like giants, called Nephilims. They in turn produced offsprings who hunt men. How do you know this? Adana asked. I see it playing out in my mind's eye like a movie, he answered. Adana's recurring night vision of being chased by sinister shadowy figures rushed to her memory, and she understood. The battle was not just for their village but for the soul of their people. The old man smiled knowingly as if reading her thoughts. Not all who look like us are truly one of us, he said, his voice low. That evening, as the villagers gathered under the tree, Berko's voice rang out. Our ancestors were promised a land, a kingdom that would be ours. But the evil one has sought to defile that promise from the beginning. And now we must stand firm as the inheritors of that promise. Come back to God. Repent. Obey his words. One day the village awoke to find Senior Father's home empty. He had fled into the night with their donations, with his co-conspirators, leaving Umatata divided and confused. As Berko stood before the villagers, they sought answers. How could Senior Father betray them like that? Not all who look like us are one of us, Adana said softly. The truth was clearer than ever. Spring had rolled around again and Adana gave birth. Berko and Adana raised their new baby to the sky, giving back all that had been given them. Their child grew. One night Berko prayed, the weight of his mission heavy on his shoulders, his voice a whisper in the night air. How long, God of our ancestors, must we carry this burden? When will the people see the truth? In the stillness, he heard the rushing river, the rustling wind, the crackle of lightning. Then a still, small voice, until the singing in the sky, until I gather my people. Behold, I am coming quickly. Even so, Adonai Yehoshua, come. Berko prayed, his heart burned with the fire of his plea. Amen. Adana whispered softly, finding comfort that Adonai Yehoshua was near.